Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Henry Calvert from the GSMA. I'm a head of networks there. Welcome you to our Open RAN Summit. Our theme is Connectivity Unleashed here at the GSMA. And I do feel that we've unleashed the potential of meeting up together and actually on face-to-face and being here, because it's been quite lively out there. I hope you've all enjoyed getting back to Barcelona and getting back to doing business with each other. So thank you very much. It's Wednesday afternoon. Sometimes people call this the graveyard shift at Mobile World Congress because everyone's been partying on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. So we put the most exciting topic in the graveyard shift, and I'm glad to see that you've been able to turn up. So today I hope we go through sort of the aspects of Open RAN, from its use cases to the maturity of Open RAN solutions out there, to how we collaborate in Open RAN and drive it further forward in the adoption, and then laterally looking at the innovation that's actually been created by a particular sector within the Open RAN community. So a good agenda. I'm not going to say much more because the content will come a little bit later on. And I think that it's probably best to start off with one of the, oh no, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong slide there. One of the leaders in the Open RAN community, the well-known, I call him Yago, but his official name is Santiago Torino from Vodafone. I think everyone knows him in the room, so Santiago, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. A pleasure to be here. How are you? Right, so I brought no slides today. Apologies for that. I may explain why in a second. So I think the topic is fantastic, needs no introduction, but I'm going to tell you a little story. First time I heard about Open RAN, it was in 2014. And it was one of the guys in my team who's actually participating in a panel and is sitting there, who first told me, you have to see this, we're running some radio workloads on an Intel CPU. You're going to love it. And then I asked a question that I heard, asked a few times that year. Why are we doing this? Like, what is this for? Why are we doing it at all? That was 2014. And we've come a long way since then. We participated in Telecom Infra project. We also entered into the Orange Alliance. We worked with the other European operators in drafting a specification, the G5. And also we are here today talking about it. So it's been very intense 8 years on which the question has evolved from what is this for? That was probably 2014, 15, to the first time we presented it in public, which I think it was 2017 in Santa Clara. I guess the question back then was, really? You doing that? Then the skeptical people started to actually realize that this may happen. Then the question eventually became, when is it going to happen? I think we're in 2022 and there's probably no more questions. But if you have any, I'm sure that you'll find the answer today. Now, why are we doing this is a very important question, I think. We're doing it, and that was right from the start, for supplier diversity, for creating optionality. And why do we need that? Well, because I remember, I'm old enough to remember 15 years ago, we had many suppliers in the radio space. Many means 10, 12, 15 choices to make. Nowadays, we have 3. And in some parts of the world, that's reduced to 2. And that is not enough. And when the options are not enough, what happens is that innovation suffers. Because there is no reason to innovate if there is no incentive. And I'm not even blaming those companies. It's human, and it's just a market dynamics. So you need to create competition, not only to have some healthy commercial contenders, but also to incentivize innovation, which drives down the total cost of ownership much faster than the commercial competition does. So 2 days ago, on Monday, we as Vodafone said that by 2030, latest, 30% of our European network is going to run Open RAN. That's quite an statement, and we really mean it. So what does that mean? Well, for the starter, it means that if our network is going to be 30% Open RAN in 2030, we will probably have to award the contracts and start implementation no later than 2025. We'll probably start that negotiation in 2024, which is only 2 years from today. So the action, believe me, for that 30% is already in motion. So we're not saying, this is going to happen, it's a long-term ambition. No, it's a plan. And we are executing that plan today. The second thing that this means, and I think is very important to understand, we haven't said 30% of rural Europe, if that's what you understood. We said 30% of a network, and believe me, it's not the rural part. It's got some rural parts, not so rural parts, it's got suburban parts, it's got urban and dense urban as well. So yes, when we say Open RAN, it does include Massive MIMO, and that is very important. Why are we saying this, or why do we even think that we can do this, is because what we are actually doing. So a couple of months ago, maybe you could read an announcement that we had the first site live in the UK. That is a site outside of Newbury, where our HQ used to be, that is running 4G and 5G. We already published the vendors that we chose earlier that year, last year, which is Dell on the servers, Wind River on containers, Samsung on the software. Some of the radios are theirs as well. NEC is also bringing radios, and we will keep integrating more radio hardware every year. There is a number of things that are important there. First, that Open RAN system is uncompromised. And this is a question that I answer 10 times a week, particularly this week. We're not taking compromises. There are no proprietary parts on it. And there is no limit in the radios that we are integrating there, meaning that is both remote radios as well as Massive MIMO as well as everything. And there are no proprietary components. The baseband is not proprietary, it's a standard server from Dell. And there is nothing else that will prevent you from actually changing the vendor to some other vendor just by software. We have the site up and running, and we've actually delivered that site in the time that we expected. So that project hasn't got any big delays. It's taking commercial traffic. It's covering some corporates. It's not got Massive MIMO yet, but that's on the lab. We're going to take on a urban area later this year in the UK. And this time next year, we will be in volume rollout. So when we say that we're going to hit 30% in Europe, is because we think that we have it under control. We had to do some things that we're not used to do and answer some questions as to how does the system integration work when you're doing Open RAN. You're no longer buying a system that is finished by someone else, and you can call him when something goes wrong. The answer to that in our case is we've actually taken on that ourselves. So we are doing the system integration ourselves. So yes, it was problematic. Yes, we found problems. We sorted them out, and we were able to deliver on time. And now we are taking on Massive MIMO, and yes, there are troubles, but we're confident that before the end of the year, it will be in operation as well. And now when things go wrong, and operations in Vodafone have someone to call, which is me in this case, no longer the vendor. But that is the model, and it works. So at the end, the reason for doing this is supplier diversity and optionality. The main benefit is innovation that is coming back to the network. That, the particular way, the ways in which that is happening are very interesting. So first, you are working not just with one company or two companies, but you're tapping an ecosystem that has 200 companies. And some of them are really good at doing one thing, and now they have line of sight for taking their innovation to the field without the need to being funneled by an incumbent architecture vendor. That is one way innovation happens. Another way innovation happens is RIC, the radio intelligent controller, in non-real time, but particularly the near real-time one, which is, I have little doubt that is going to be one of the factors that Open RAN will use to overtake the incumbent architecture very quickly. And for someone like us, not only had to get involved in things like system integration that we weren't doing before, we've also had to up our game and throw ourselves into silicon, which is an area that it was very interesting, but we were not involved to any depth before either. So we used to just simply look at the specification of things. Open RAN made us open the lid and look at the architecture inside and the components. Well, now we're looking inside the chips to see which architecture is better, and we are working with the likes of Intel, Broadcom, ARM, RISC-V, and the others. Now, with all that visibility, I leave you to the session, but you may have many questions. I think you're going to have the answer to all of them, but there is one thing that you shouldn't question. This is happening. And the question is no longer even when it's going to happen, because it is happening now. So I hope you enjoy the rest of today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Iago. And if there's any confidence you actually need of being an operator that wants to start to look at or even deploy Open RAN on a commercial network, then it's Vodafone. There is obviously clear greenfield networks that we've seen from Rakuten that have also succeeded from Open RAN. But Vodafone is showing the leadership of how to have that ultimate problem of changing your complete network radio architecture and deploy a new technology at the same time and taking ownership of that. It's a phenomenal achievement that they've made. Next, we're going to have the session around Open RAN about the different use cases, different approaches you can actually take when you're thinking about deploying Open RAN. And to start us off in that discussion, we've got Mutesh Chabara, and he is from Radsys. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I know this is an afternoon session, so hopefully we'll keep you awake. So first of all, thank you for Santiago, especially from and the Vodafone team for leading deployments of Open RAN from the front. And of course, we got a really good picture with respect to the deployment which Vodafone is targeting. What we are going to talk about is primarily from the perspective of the newer use cases which are going to lead to more deployments of Open RAN and also visibility into the progress, both in terms of specifications and also deployments across the globe. So this is the quick agenda, both for potential and the progress that we're making. Quick history about Radsys. So Radsys is a company we were founded way back in 1987, and we cater to multiple areas, right from digital endpoints to disaggregated networks, both for mobility and broadband, and also a rich suite of applications for communication and digital engagements. and also network services, which is becoming very key for Open RAN. This is the Open RAN contribution, if you may look at it from Radis's perspective. And Santiago talked about 2014 when there was a POC done in Vodafone. And Radis started working on Open RAN even before that, along with our partner Intel, to come out with these workloads which can really demonstrate that Open RAN is a possibility. In terms of our contribution across the forums, telecom infra, right from the LTE, as you can see. So right in 2014 before, and we have done a few projects with different operators like SKT and TIM as well. In terms of also contribution towards various Open RAN community labs as well. But one key part is around our contributions to O-RAN Alliance and the standardizations around it. We have been co-chair for the Working Group 8 since 2019, and we have made a lot of contributions, especially on the E2 interface in the Working Group 3. We are also making contributions in the test and integration focus working group, and which is also a key part from an integration perspective from system integration that Santiago led to. And we are also leading another open source initiative around 5G distributed unit, DU. We have also contributed in terms of the small cell forum interface, that is a split 6 interface, the NFAPI standards, and we were also awarded for our Open RAN contributions by the small cell forum there. And also in ONF, we have contributed various open source to also, we were the founding member for, or we are the founding member for the SD-RAN, and we have done integrations with ONF near real-time brick as well. There are several other forums that we are also working closely with, including CBRS Alliance. This is a snapshot of our ecosystem. So actually what openness is, this is what it shows, where you have a bubble where it's not 1, 2, 3, there are probably 20 here, but this is still a small list because this is a small slide. But if you really look at it, we are leading the openness through 2 initiatives. One is multi-platform. Every platform has the advantages or the, we would say, the use cases that the platform is strong at. So we enable our software, our CU/DU software, for multiple platforms. So that would mean, on one side, from an NPU perspective, both on x86 and ARM architecture. On the other side, also integration with various layer 1s out there. And you can see some of the names here. And on the periphery, if you look at it, there are all these layer 1s that we work with, and also the radio vendors that we have integrated with. But this is not it. The other architecture part is also very important. That is also, we call that as a multi-architecture approach, because the same software, which is leading from standards perspective, should be able to cater to not only just the macro part of the deployments, but should also be able to cater to the private 5G use cases which are coming in through small cells. So the same software on the macro side with open interfaces on different splits as specified through 3GPP, also being able to cater to a very sophisticated or very optimized architecture on a very small footprint, which is probably like a 4-core ARM device. The same software caters to those. We'll talk about some of those use cases that we believe are really leading to Open RAN adoption, apart from the macro use cases. And that's where we look at it, the private verticals. So whether it's with respect to the industry automation or industry 4.0 use cases which are coming around, and we see a lot of buzz around this adoption of 5G in industry automation. And release 16 and URLLC will lead the way here. But again, right from critical infrastructure, smart grid adopting 5G, to automotives, smart automotives, and also the smart home initiatives or smart city initiatives across the globe. And also, of course, the IoT factor of it from a scalability perspective will also lead to adoption of Open RAN-based 5G deployments. Then extreme mobile broadband. We know that this is a real use case today. In fact, the first use case which is being used for deployment. And then also a lot of demanding factors coming in both for indoor and outdoor venues or private network deployments. So these are the use cases from an endpoint perspective, if you look at it, or devices perspective. From the infrastructure perspective, from base station perspective, there two splits are leading the way, the 7.2 split, which is very popular for scalable architecture. But at the same time, the split 6 is also very popular for small cell-based approach as well, which is based upon the NFAPI standards. And in both, you have still option of split 2, depending upon the scalability, depending upon the use case, depending upon latency requirements for individual use case. You can either have CU and DU collapsed at one place, or you can have CU and DU distributed, CU being in the cloud and DU being closer to the edge. And of course, if you look at it from a small cell perspective, the AIO, this is all in one where CU and DU are collapsed together and running along with the, and radio and DU are also collapsed together, because for small cells, especially if you think about from indoor small cell perspective, BOM is going to be the critical play. So whether at that point of time, from openness to all the interfaces will make sense, or to optimize on the CPU. But still, the intelligence in all these different use cases will still come from E2, the E2 interface or the RIC. And also the management plane will be through O1. These are again some of the factors which are leading to traction. If you look at it right from the network modernization of public networks, different private network verticals which are leading to the similar theme, right from disaggregation to hardware and software decoupling, edge computing use cases, and similarly, we also look at it from a shared spectrum perspective. The need is the same, which is creating open interfaces and open solutions. With respect to momentum, we already heard from Vodafone, and we see the similar theme coming in from rights of Dish, Telefonica, DT, Orange, Rakuten, across the globe. In fact, that's what we look at it. With respect to standardizations, how they have evolved, again, this is a very important piece. All the work which has been done primarily on the Open RAN or the learning has been fed into the specifications. And that's where we see in the middle, the specs are maturing, and the MVP releases, which are actually consolidating all the operator inputs and creating a standard approach which will cater to all the standard vendor community, is very helpful. And a quick approach on the policies. So there are various forums which are also contributing or evolving into the policies which will evolve to a greater Open RAN success in future. In summary, we see a lot of adoption for Open RAN in both public and private networks. And of course, operators and vendors are all aligned very well in terms of making the early successful deployments here. The lessons which we have learned are leading to robust standards, and also the advancements both in the hardware, software, the RIC part of it. Everything is going to make a solid base for us for our future Open RAN-based networks. So Open RAN is definitely here to stay and evolve.
Thank you, Munish. We're just going to arrange the set for the next session. We're going to have a panel discussion around Open RAN and the opportunity use cases. And could I invite up to the stage Munish, thank you very much, and also Francisco Paganatelli. again.
Hi. Hello. Great to meet you.
So we're nicely socially distanced. I'm going to stay behind the lectern, and therefore we can see the beautiful faces of these two people. I have a face for radio, just out of interest. So, Francisco, let's start with yourself and Vodafone. And what scenarios have you been looking at from Vodafone's point of view in deploying Open RAN? Where are the opportunities that you see?
Well, I think, well, first of all, good to be here. Thank you for having me today, and great to participate in this panel. It's a bit late or today, but let's see how the conversation goes. So back to your question, we are essentially looking at everywhere. You know, I think Jago mentioned before that Open RAN is happening. We are not restricted to any environment, so it's essentially a new way of doing radio. So everything is possible, not everything at the same time. So we are expecting to go into the more complex scenarios from 2023 onwards, next year onward. But we are not limiting ourselves at all. Actually, to get there in that time frame, you need to be working today on it. So it's happening.
And Vodafone is a group company. You have many deployments in different markets.
Yeah.
Are you seeing different requirements from the markets, and how is Open RAN coping with that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, but I think radio is radio everywhere. So I remember when I first joined Vodafone, I used to have conversation with some markets, some countries that were saying, oh no, here in Greece, our worlds are different, so penetration is not the same. Well, that's actually not really the case. Radio is the same everywhere, but it's true that we have different bands in different countries, or there's some requirements, but I think generally speaking, same solution fits everywhere. Yeah.
And your markets are accepting that as well? Are they trying to have a little bit of a say-so on how the end specifications come out?
Well, to a point, when we are in group working on what comes next, you pretend you know everything, but in reality you don't. And the reality is you need to get feedback from the field. So in that sense, it's always very useful to count on the inputs from our different operators and also partners, because it's not just Vodafone doing this for ourselves. We have a very extensive network of partners that we provide support and get input from them as well.
Thank you. And Manish, from your point of view, a similar sort of question, different markets around the world, how do you see their requirements and the solutions? I mean, is it a big change for RADSys when you're talking to different operators or in different markets? I mean, what's the general trend? Are you seeing, like Vodafone, which has the ability to say, this is how it's going to be? What's it like from a vendor point of view on being able to talk to a customer in the different markets?
Sure. So I would say, first of all, the theme is the same. The basic requirement is the same, which is disaggregation, openness on the interfaces, bringing more vendors, and scalability, right? And following the specifications. But also, depending upon different geos and different use cases, we have seen additional requirements which would cater to different use cases. For example, if there is for standard macro deployments, probably these are very common, but we do see that at many places there are, for example, private 5G use cases being driven out there. So, and also led by operators. In those particular use cases, the same shoe may not fit into those use cases. So that also leads to some modifications in the architecture from a deployment perspective. The openness still remains the same theme, but as I also presented in my slides, so whether you host CU and DU together, or you move CU to the cloud and have DU still closer to the edge, that's one example. Again, 7.2 split, perfect, but when it comes to indoor small cells, 7.2 split, whether that caters to that use case, and also with respect to latency requirements. So again, for small cells, the form factor also leads to collapsing that particular interface as well. But, and I touched upon it, the two important interfaces, which are very common. And also, we see the same theme coming in from operators across the globe. The intelligence to be fed into the network has to come in from RIC through the E2 interface, fed into whichever kind of base station it is or whichever kind of RAN equipment it is. Very clear. The other part is also around management. The management is also a very complex piece of it from an operator's perspective, right? So also managing from an operations perspective, having a common management interface to manage all kind of their RAN equipment, that is also very important. But we do see, depending upon different use cases which are needed, and this is going to further evolve as more and more specifications comes in, release 16, 17 further. This will also lead to changes around those specifications and adoption of other open interfaces as well.
I mean, that's interesting. How do you actually, from your point of view, how would you like to see consistency in these specifications and requirements? Is it just from a product catalog that people can actually order because everyone looks at it and says, I want to tweak that? But how do you think across the industry, because adoption in scale is about having that consistency, how do you feel that that could actually happen in the industry?
Yes, and I would say this has to be led through the software approach. So, and we have to find the commonality across all these different use cases that we talked about. And the commonality has to be part of the software. And we as Radisys, we have also gone through a similar journey. When we looked at it, when we started way back from I would say, a commercialization of 5G 3 to 4 years back, we saw that when what form factor we started with, the use cases around it, the features around it, it's not fitting the same what is required for a different form factor. So, but we looked at it, what is the common factor here? The common factor would come across is standards, so following the standards to its core, that's the key DNA. The other part is having options to be able to create configurable or create or giving flexibility, let me say that way, flexibility for people to adapt some of these interfaces for their use cases. And that's what we have created through a common software which can scale up for a virtual kind of a deployment and also scale down for an optimized solution. So, and also with the RIC coming into the picture, again, this is also led through the software-based approach. So again, software has to lead its way here.
Thank you. And Francisco, we were talking about consistency in a little bit through standardizations, and the European operators have come together and started to define their requirement, which is great. Would you like to see that expand around the world from that blueprint that you have started?
Yes, definitely. I think, as Moniz is saying, it's very important that we don't have fragmentation in the specifications. So that, I think, is the first step. We need to make sure we are not creating the different worlds for Open RAN. So it's very important that we continue to support the Open RAN Alliance. It's also very important that we continue doing more and more new interface definition, new open interfaces. But then, in relation to your question, what comes after you have all those specifications defined? It's important that we make sure that there is when it comes to how to implement those specifications, you also take the as much as possible the same approach. You don't create hundreds of different configurations. You have the same priority, and that is particularly required right now because there is an ecosystem of suppliers out there, but money that flows to the system will be of use if there is not hundreds of configurations and too many different options. So in that sense, we've been working with the operators in Europe to align on how to implement the specification and what is important and what should come first. And those specifications are public, and they are public because exactly for this reason we want them to be used and adopted as much as we can, so we are efficient when we deliver Open RAN.
Thank you very much. We'll talk about in session 3 how the collaboration is going and how further that can be advanced. So that's an excellent segue to a little bit later. Thank you. Getting back to sort of the use cases and deployment options and that we have, from Vodafone's point of view, what are the key criteria that you're looking through for commercialization of Open RAN on your networks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, first of all, we need to make sure that the Open RAN kit, the Open RAN solutions, are providing at least the same performance we have with traditional radio. So there's no compromise at all. So there's nothing like reducing the expectation, right? So that's clearly the bar. We have a project in the UK right now happening, and we are monitoring this all the time. If KPIs are not met, we are not continuing, right? So that will be measured as we go into more complex scenarios, right? So that's one thing, the actual maturity of the solution. But also at the same time, what I would say is today Open RAN in terms of performance and cost is at right level to start competing with traditional. But we have a plan to improve significantly further. So TCO or innovation, I mean, Monish has been mentioning the RIC. We need to see some of those innovations happening, and we are monitoring that across performance and cost. The plan that we have is actually met. So those are the key points.
And how do you find with those sort of meeting that TCO and the investment you're making in Vodafone in R&D in Open RAN, how do you think you can cater that for the different generational changes that we're actually seeing? Are you supporting just 2G on your Open RAN systems? I take not. I take it it's probably all the way to 4G and 5G. But we're going to see 5G Advanced come, and dare I say, we might even see 6G in our lifetimes. Maybe in yours, maybe not in mine. But how do you think Open RAN is going to cope with those sort of R&D cost structures to go through the generational changes?
I think that's a very, very good question. Open RAN is not too old, right? So how can you develop and deploy in just a few years solutions that for the traditional radio world have been developed over decades, right? So if you are sitting on a vendor side, like Monish is doing, I'm more comfortable on the operator side sometimes, but if you are on that side, you're getting requests to provide 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, all the Gs on the world, all the solutions, and it's virtually very difficult to respond to that. So the only way to do it, I think, is through collaboration, and to a point that is kind of happening. So companies like yours, for example, are providing a very good foundation for others to piggyback on it and then deliver solutions. So it's collaboration is the answer, and then obviously money needs to be supporting all this effort, and we as operators, we have a lot of responsibility. We need to be deploying Open RAN so that this effort pays off. That's why Iago was mentioning our announcement about what is coming next and our commitment to deploy significant part of the network. So collaboration is the answer, and on our side we are not. The only thing we could be giving up a little bit is 3G, and I say a little bit because when you look into some of the markets, I'm thinking about Africa right now, we still have that requirement. So 3G will be phased out, but if that happens in 4, 5 years, 6 years from now, and you need to launch next year, you still require it. No? So 3G is on the table, but it's less priority than the others. 2G is a must-do. 4G, what can I say? And then 5G is the current G and still the future, right? So a lot to do, my friend.
I mean, it's a very good point you actually say, and I think Iago said around about 30% of Vodafone's network would be Open RAN. I actually think that's nearer 100% of the opportunity as you mentioned, there are different markets at different
Yeah.
levels and different size. It's almost that you're going to look to actually replace most of your equipment that you can at some point. I mean, some equipment's still going through its capital lifespan. You know,
Exactly.
it's still an asset on the books. I mean, no CFO is going to say, "Oh, just get rid of that and put some new tech in,"
No.
are they? So
yeah, actually, we came to that figure after doing very detailed planning, obviously, and you're quite right. You know, it takes time. We are deploying kit right now that is not going to be replaced in a year. It will take 7 years, or at least for that to happen.
it's very impressive. Just the, you know, so hindsight. So you get Rakuten, who's just had a greenfield and shot at it, whereas you know, running a network, you've got a lot of considerations. So Minesh, just on that understanding of the R&D investment that has to happen to either just to get to a sort of a request from the operators on the detail that they want, either 2G, 3G, 4G generations, and the R&D you've got. How tricky do you actually find that as a vendor to actually meet those use cases they've got and the generational changes in that? And do you have an idea of kind of what the market share Open RAN needs to get to get sustainable so we can enjoy the interoperability that it brings?
And I think this is a very interesting question and a problem which Francisco talked about. And we did brainstorm this problem very often, because especially for the technologies which are already deployed today, when we talk about whether it's about 2G and 3G, you're right, is going to get phased out, but 4G for sure. But does it make sense to go back and open 2G at this time? Because the standards are definitely not working on it. If you talk about from our vendor ecosystem, it requires huge investment. Is there a window of opportunity to go and rip and replace everything on open standards? So that's a question that I think as a vendor community, we need to brainstorm and we need to look at the business case coming in through the operators. But I would still say there is definitely a need in terms of evolution, and for example, 4G, we have seen a revived interest, especially coming in on the 4G side, and we have seen similarly the vendor community also, especially on the radio side, also gearing up in terms of supporting 7.2 split and orange specs for 4G standards. So 4G and 5G definitely, and going forward, 2G is something that has to be brainstormed as part of Open RAN Alliance, and whether that's a reality for us. But on the same topic, that what will lead to the adoption of Open RAN? So the adoption of Open RAN, will this backward compatibility, is that critical to move forward with respect to more adoption? Or we define different ways of working together with existing infrastructure so that we can overlay Open RAN systems on the existing networks. And as you said, these are assets which are already deployed. Even the cost of ripping them apart is going to be much more, right? So those are some of the areas which I think as Open RAN from a standards perspective, we need to brainstorm and find opportunities.
I have to add to this one, from our side, our view is that we don't want to be mixing suppliers or technologies. So the sites will be either full Open RAN or not, but nothing in the middle. I think that's our experience so far. So yeah, it can get complex, but we prefer that approach, certainly. So no overlay networks with Open RAN.